The Wealth of Nations, a journey into the mind of Adam Smith. Welcome to another deep dive into history's most influential minds here at FactUp. Today, we're exploring a book that has shaped economies, governments, and even the way we think about work and wealth. Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations. Whether you're an aspiring economist, a curious philosopher, or simply someone wondering how we got to where we are in the modern economic world, this text is for you. Imagine a time when the world was just beginning to understand the power of trade, labor, and free markets, before terms like capitalism were even coined. This is where Adam Smith steps in, a pioneer whose ideas about economics remain as relevant today as they were in the 18th century. But what exactly did he discover, and why does it still matter? We're going to break it all down for you in a comprehensive yet accessible way. If you've ever wondered why some nations thrive while others struggle, or how your personal decisions in the marketplace influence global economies, you're in the right place. Join me as we uncover the secrets behind Smith's masterwork, revealing why it's called the Wealth of Nations and what this wealth truly represents. Not just in terms of money, but in the prosperity of human creativity, labor, and cooperation. Ready to embark on this journey? Let's dive in. But before we dive, a brief biography of Adam Smith. Adam Smith was born in Kirkcaldy, Scotland in 1723 and is widely regarded as the father of modern economics. His groundbreaking work, The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776, laid the foundation for classical economics and introduced ideas that continue to shape economic thought today. Smith's early education took place in Scotland, where he showed a keen interest in philosophy. He attended the University of Glasgow at the age of 14 and later studied at Balliol College, Oxford. His time at Glasgow had a profound impact on him, especially under the tutelage of philosopher Francis Hutcheson, who introduced him to the ideas of moral philosophy and political economy. After completing his studies, Smith began his academic career by delivering public lectures in Edinburgh, which gained him recognition in intellectual circles. In 1751, he became a professor of logic at the University of Glasgow and shortly thereafter, a professor of moral philosophy. It was during his time at Glasgow that Smith developed many of the ideas that would later appear in The Wealth of Nations. In 1759, Smith published The Theory of Moral Sentiments, a philosophical work exploring human nature, sympathy, and the foundations of morality. This book established him as a leading thinker in the Scottish Enlightenment and earned him considerable acclaim. In the early 1760s, Smith left academia to become a tutor to the young Duke of Buccleuch. This position allowed him to travel across Europe, where he met other leading intellectuals, including the French economists known as the physiocrats. His exposure to European economic thought, particularly the ideas of free trade, had a significant influence on his later work. In 1776, Smith published an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations, a monumental text that introduced the concepts of the division of labor, the invisible hand, and the importance of free markets. The book was an instant success and is still considered one of the most important works in economic theory. Smith spent the remainder of his life in Edinburgh, where he continued to refine his economic ideas. He lived modestly and never married, devoting his time to his writing, correspondence with other thinkers, and public service. He passed away in 1790 at the age of 67, leaving behind a legacy that would shape economic thought for centuries to come. The birth of modern economics, division of labor, and productivity. One of the most groundbreaking concepts Adam Smith introduced was the idea of the division of labor. Smith's analysis begins with something seemingly simple, how a pin is made. But within this simple process lies a revolutionary idea about how work and productivity can be maximized. By dividing labor into specialized tasks, Smith explains, each worker can focus on a specific part of the production process, increasing efficiency and output. Instead of one person doing everything to produce a pin, different workers focus on each step, some drawing out the wire, others cutting it, some sharpening the pin, and so on. This seemingly minor innovation leads to an exponential increase in productivity. Smith argues that this division of labor is the key to economic prosperity because it allows each worker to hone their skills and work faster and more efficiently. But there's more to it than just speed. Specialization encourages innovation. Workers who focus on a single task often find ways to improve the process, leading to advancements in tools and techniques that can benefit entire industries. Example, the pin factory. Smith famously illustrated the division of labor by describing a pin factory. A single worker trying to make pins from start to finish might only make a few pins a day. But if the process is divided into distinct tasks, with each worker handling one small part, productivity soars. In a properly organized factory, 10 workers could make tens of thousands of pins in a single day. This wasn't just a theory, it was a reflection of what was happening in the early stages of the Industrial Revolution, and it continues to shape modern manufacturing processes today. The broader implications. The concept of the division of labor goes beyond simple manufacturing. Smith extended this idea to all forms of labor in society. In agriculture, for example, the farmer may focus on growing crops, while others handle the transportation, distribution, and sale of those crops. In modern economies, specialization allows industries to flourish by focusing on what they do best and trading with others for what they need. This concept has far-reaching implications for the growth of nations. A country that allows its people to specialize will be more productive than one that forces everyone to be a jack of all trades. It's not just about individual efficiency, it's about the collective efficiency of an entire society. Quote from the text, "The greatest improvements in the productive powers of labor seem to have been the effects of the division of labor." Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. Smith shows how this principle applies to all industries, laying the groundwork for modern economic theory. In a globalized world, this specialization extends across borders, with countries specializing in the production of certain goods based on their natural resources, skills, and technology. The invisible hand, a free market's greatest strength. Next, we turn to one of Adam Smith's most enduring concepts, the invisible hand. This metaphor has become synonymous with free market economics, but what exactly does it mean? Smith believed that individuals, acting in their own self-interest, inadvertently contribute to the overall good of society, even if they don't intend to. When people make decisions, whether as consumers, producers, or investors, they're driven by personal motives, usually to maximize their own benefits. But as they do so, they participate in an economic system that distributes resources, creates wealth, and encourages innovation. How the invisible hand works. Imagine a baker who wants to earn a living. To maximize profits, they bake the best bread at the lowest cost. To attract more customers, they might innovate, perhaps by creating a new type of bread or improving their recipe. Meanwhile, customers benefit from better and cheaper products. The baker is guided by their self-interest, but the end result is that society as a whole gains from better bread at competitive prices. This is the invisible hand at work. Smith's insight was that when markets are left to operate without interference, they naturally allocate resources in the most efficient way possible. The prices of goods and services are determined by supply and demand. If something is in short supply but high demand, its price rises, encouraging producers to make more. If there's too much of something, its price falls, signaling to producers that they should cut back. The role of competition. Competition is essential to the functioning of the invisible hand. When businesses compete for customers, they're forced to innovate, improve quality, and reduce prices. This leads to better choices for consumers and drives economic growth. Without competition, businesses become complacent and markets stagnate. Smith warned, however, that monopolies and government intervention could distort this process. If a single company controls a market, it can raise prices and limit innovation, harming consumers. Similarly, if the government imposes too many regulations, it can stifle competition and hinder the free flow of goods and services. Quote from the text, "By pursuing his own interest, he frequently promotes that of the society more effectually than when he really intends to promote it." This invisible hand guides not only individual markets, but entire economies. By allowing markets to function freely without excessive regulation or government interference, society as a whole can prosper. Value and price, the true measure of wealth. Smith's theory of value is another cornerstone of his work. He makes an important distinction between two types of value. 1. Value in use, how useful something is. 2. Value in exchange, how much something is worth in trade. For example, water has immense value in use. It is essential for life. But in many cases, it has little value in exchange because it's so abundant. On the other hand, diamonds, which are far less useful, have a much higher value in exchange because they are scarce and in demand. Smith's insights into value helped shape the way economists understand pricing. He argued that the value of a product is determined not just by its usefulness, but by the amount of labor required to produce it. This labor theory of value became a foundational concept in classical economics. Price in the market. Smith also explained how prices are determined in a market economy. According to him, there are two types of prices. 1. Natural price, the price that reflects the cost of production, including wages, rent, and profit. 2. Market price, the actual price that a product is sold for, which fluctuates based on supply and demand. When demand exceeds supply, the market price rises above the natural price. This encourages producers to increase production, eventually bringing the market price back down. Conversely, when supply exceeds demand, the market price falls below the natural price, and producers cut back, allowing the price to rise again. This dynamic creates a self-regulating system where prices naturally gravitate toward their equilibrium. Quote from the text, "Labor was the first price, the original purchase money that was paid for all things." Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. Smith's labor theory of value is central to his economic philosophy. He believed that labor is the true source of wealth and that a nation's prosperity depends on the productivity of its workers. The role of government, a necessary balance. While Smith championed free markets, he also recognized that some government intervention was necessary to ensure the smooth functioning of the economy. He identified three key responsibilities for government. 1. Protecting society from external threats. A strong defense is essential for a nation's security. 2. Administering justice. A legal system is needed to enforce contracts and protect property rights. 3. Providing public goods. Certain goods and services, such as roads, bridges, and education, benefit society as a whole but may not be profitable for private businesses to provide. In these cases, the government should step in to ensure these needs are met. Public goods and infrastructure. Smith's ideas about public goods laid the foundation for modern public policy. He argued that while private businesses should be free to pursue profits, some goods and services are so essential that the government must ensure their provision. Roads and bridges, for example, are vital for commerce, but may not generate enough profit for private companies to build and maintain them. In these cases, it's up to the government to step in. While Adam Smith firmly advocated for minimal government interference in economic affairs, he was far from being an advocate of complete laissez-faire capitalism. His recognition of the need for government intervention in certain sectors underscores his nuanced view of economics. Smith believed that while the invisible hand could guide markets efficiently, there were limits to what the market could achieve on its own. Governments, he argued, were necessary for providing three key services: defense, justice, and public works. Without these fundamental structures in place, the free market would falter under the weight of instability and inefficiency. Defense and national security. Smith's first essential role for government is the protection of the nation from external threats. He reasoned that the safety and security of a nation were paramount to ensuring a stable environment for economic activity. Without a strong defense, societies would be vulnerable to invasion and warfare, which could destroy economic systems and disrupt trade. While private enterprises could not bear the cost of maintaining an army or navy, it was the government's responsibility to ensure the nation's defense. Justice and the rule of law. Justice and law enforcement are critical elements in Smith's view of a functioning society. He believed that without the proper enforcement of contracts and the protection of property rights, markets would descend into chaos. Corruption, theft, and dishonesty would flourish in a system where the rule of law is weak, thereby undermining the invisible hand's ability to allocate resources efficiently. Governments, therefore, must maintain a judicial system that safeguards the rights of individuals and ensures fair play in the marketplace. Public works and infrastructure. Public goods, those goods that benefit society but are unlikely to be provided by private enterprise, are also within the government's purview. Smith used examples like roads, bridges, and ports to illustrate how such infrastructure is critical for trade and economic activity. However, because these projects often require significant upfront investment and may not yield immediate financial returns, private businesses have little incentive to develop them. The government must step in to build and maintain this infrastructure for the common good. Smith also acknowledged the importance of education, arguing that an educated population is essential for a well-functioning economy. By investing in public education, governments can ensure that all citizens have the skills needed to contribute to society and the economy. He viewed education as a public good that benefits society as a whole, rather than just the individual. Quote from the text, "The expense of public works and public institutions is beneficial to the whole society and ought to be defrayed by the general contribution of the whole society." Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. This idea of public investment is the precursor to modern-day infrastructure projects, where governments play an active role in creating the necessary conditions for commerce to flourish. Smith's insights are particularly relevant today, as governments worldwide continue to grapple with the challenge of balancing public spending with economic growth. International trade and the concept of absolute advantage. Perhaps one of Adam Smith's most influential contributions to economic theory is his concept of absolute advantage in international trade. This idea forms the foundation for why countries engage in trade and how they benefit from it. What is absolute advantage? Smith argued that if a country can produce a good more efficiently, at a lower cost, than another country, it should specialize in producing that good and trade for other goods it needs. This specialization allows each country to benefit from the efficiencies gained through trade, as it can focus on what it does best while obtaining other goods from countries that produce them more efficiently. For instance, if country A can produce wheat at a lower cost than country B, and country B can produce wine at a lower cost than country A, it makes sense for country A to specialize in wheat and trade it for wine, and for country B to do the opposite. This way, both countries benefit from trade, as they each obtain goods at a lower cost than if they tried to produce everything themselves. Smith's theory of absolute advantage was a revolutionary departure from the mercantilist thinking of his time, which held that the wealth of nations was a zero-sum game, and that countries should strive to accumulate gold and protect domestic industries from foreign competition through tariffs and trade barriers. Instead, Smith demonstrated that trade could be mutually beneficial, with both nations emerging better off. The impact of specialization. Smith's theory extends beyond international trade to all forms of production. Just as countries can benefit from specializing in the goods they produce most efficiently, individuals and businesses can do the same. Specialization leads to greater productivity as workers and companies focus on tasks they excel at, while trading for goods and services they are less efficient at producing. Quote from the text, "It is the maxim of every prudent master of a family, never to attempt to make at home what it will cost him more to make than to buy." Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. This idea of specialization and trade is at the core of modern economic theory. Today, global trade is built on the principle of comparative advantage, a refinement of Smith's absolute advantage, which was later developed by David Ricardo. But the basic insight remains the same. Trade allows nations to allocate resources more efficiently and maximize their economic potential. The fall of mercantilism. Smith's theories helped dismantle the prevailing economic philosophy of mercantilism, which advocated for protectionism, tariffs, and the accumulation of wealth through the restriction of imports. Mercantilists believed that a nation's wealth was measured by its stockpile of gold and silver, and that the best way to increase national wealth was by exporting more than importing. Smith, however, showed that wealth is not simply a stockpile of precious metals, but rather the total output of a nation's economy. By focusing on production and trade, nations could increase their wealth and improve the standard of living for their citizens. Smith's arguments for free trade and against mercantilism laid the groundwork for the globalized economy we see today. Competition, the lifeblood of a healthy market. Another key element of Smith's economic theory is the role of competition in driving innovation and efficiency. Smith believed that competition is essential for a functioning market, as it forces producers to continually improve their products and lower their prices to attract consumers. Without competition, monopolies and oligopolies can form, which can stifle innovation and lead to higher prices for consumers. In a competitive market, however, businesses must constantly innovate to stay ahead of their rivals. This dynamic leads to better products, lower prices, and increased economic growth. The virtue of self-interest. Smith's belief in the power of competition is closely tied to his understanding of human nature. He argued that people are naturally motivated by self-interest and that this self-interest drives them to work hard, innovate, and seek out new opportunities. Far from being a negative force, Smith saw self-interest as a positive driver of economic progress. When people are free to pursue their own goals, they contribute to the greater good of society by creating new products, improving services, and driving economic growth. Smith's famous metaphor of the invisible hand illustrates how self-interest, when channeled through competition in a free market, leads to outcomes that benefit society as a whole. By competing with one another, businesses create better products and services, which in turn benefits consumers. This is the beauty of the free market. It aligns the self-interest of individuals with the collective interest of society. Monopolies and market failures. While Smith recognized the importance of competition, he also warned against the dangers of monopolies. In a monopoly, a single company controls the entire market for a particular product or service, which allows it to charge higher prices and limit consumer choice. Without competition, there is no incentive for the monopoly to innovate or improve its products. Smith argued that governments should act to prevent monopolies and ensure that markets remain competitive. He believed that certain regulations were necessary to maintain a level playing field and prevent companies from exploiting consumers. This idea laid the groundwork for modern antitrust laws, which seek to prevent monopolies and promote competition. Quote from the text: "People of the same trade seldom meet together, even for merriment and diversion, but the conversation ends in a conspiracy against the public, or in some contrivance to raise prices." Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. Smith's insight into the dangers of monopolies and cartels is as relevant today as it was in the 18th century. In industries where competition is limited, companies can collude to fix prices, reduce quality, and exploit consumers. Governments must remain vigilant to ensure that markets remain competitive and that consumers are protected from the abuses of monopolies. The role of investment in economic growth. Adam Smith emphasized the importance of investment in both physical and human capital as a driver of economic growth. He understood that for an economy to thrive, it must consistently reinvest its resources into expanding its productive capacity. This idea is closely tied to Smith's broader argument about the accumulation of capital and the way it drives the wealth of nations. Capital accumulation. Smith saw the accumulation of capital, whether in the form of machinery, tools, buildings, or infrastructure, as essential to increasing the productivity of labor. He argued that as more capital is invested in an economy, workers are provided with better tools and equipment, which in turn allows them to produce more goods with less effort. This increase in productivity translates into higher output and greater wealth for the entire society. Reinvestment of profits. Smith also noted that when businesses reinvest their profits back into the economy by expanding their operations, purchasing new equipment, or hiring more workers, it creates a virtuous cycle of growth. The additional output generated by this investment leads to more profits, which can be reinvested again, fueling further growth. However, Smith warned that capital should be used efficiently. He was wary of speculative investments and wasteful spending that did not contribute to the productive capacity of the economy. Instead, he argued that capital should be directed toward industries and activities that would generate the greatest return in terms of increased productivity. Human capital. In addition to physical capital, Smith recognized the importance of human capital. the skills, knowledge, and abilities of workers. He argued that education and training were essential for creating a productive workforce. An educated population, he reasoned, would be better able to innovate, solve problems, and contribute to the overall wealth of society. Smith's emphasis on the role of human capital in economic growth was ahead of its time. Today, economists widely recognize that investment in education and workforce training is a critical component of long-term economic prosperity. Quote from the text: "The annual labor of every nation is the fund which originally supplies it with all the necessaries and conveniences of life which it annually consumes." Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. This quote highlights Smith's belief that labor, combined with capital investment, is the true source of a nation's wealth. Without investment in both physical and human capital, an economy cannot sustain long-term growth. The nature of wealth, breaking away from mercantilism. One of the most revolutionary aspects of The Wealth of Nations is its redefinition of wealth. Before Smith, mercantilist thinkers believed that the wealth of a nation was measured by its accumulation of gold and silver. Mercantilism encouraged countries to hoard precious metals, impose tariffs, and restrict imports to maintain a favorable balance of trade. Smith shattered this notion by arguing that wealth is not based on how much gold a country possesses, but on its ability to produce goods and services that meet the needs and wants of its people. In other words, wealth is created by the labor of a nation's workforce and the productivity of its industries, the real measure of wealth. Smith argued that the true measure of a nation's wealth is its productive capacity. He saw wealth not as something that could be stockpiled in a vault, but as the ongoing production and exchange of goods and services that improve people's lives. According to Smith, a nation that produces a wide variety of high-quality goods is wealthier than one that merely accumulates gold, because its citizens enjoy a higher standard of living. This insight was a major departure from the zero-sum thinking of mercantilism, where one nation's gain was seen as another's loss. In Smith's vision, trade and production create a positive-sum game in which all participants can benefit. Productivity as the source of wealth. Smith also focused on the role of productivity in creating wealth. He argued that the more efficiently a nation could produce goods, the wealthier it would become. This led to his emphasis on the division of labor and specialization as critical factors in boosting productivity. Smith's concept of wealth remains central to modern economic thought. Today, economists define a nation's wealth in terms of its gross domestic product, GDP, which measures the total value of all goods and services produced within a country. While gold and silver still have value, they are no longer seen as the primary indicators of a nation's economic health. Quote from the text: "The wealth of a nation consists in the abundant supply of the necessaries and conveniences of life." Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. This statement encapsulates Smith's revolutionary redefinition of wealth. By focusing on production and consumption, rather than the accumulation of precious metals, Smith laid the foundation for modern economics. The dangers of protectionism and trade barriers. Adam Smith was an early advocate for free trade, and he believed that protectionist policies, such as tariffs, quotas, and trade restrictions, were harmful to both the domestic economy and the global economy. He argued that when countries impose barriers to trade, they distort the natural flow of goods and services, leading to inefficiency, higher prices, and less choice for consumers. The fallacy of mercantilism. Under the mercantilist system, governments sought to protect domestic industries by imposing tariffs on imported goods. The idea was that by making foreign goods more expensive, domestic producers would be able to sell their products at higher prices and maintain a competitive advantage. However, Smith argued that this approach was fundamentally flawed. First, tariffs and trade restrictions limit the benefits of specialization and comparative advantage. When countries are forced to produce goods they are not particularly good at making, they waste resources and produce inferior products. Consumers end up paying more for lower quality goods, and the overall efficiency of the global economy suffers. Second, protectionism often leads to retaliation from other countries, resulting in trade wars that can harm both sides. When one country imposes tariffs, its trading partners may respond by imposing their own tariffs, leading to a downward spiral of escalating trade barriers. Free trade as a positive-sum game. In contrast to mercantilism, Smith argued that trade is a positive-sum game. When countries engage in free trade, they can specialize in the goods they produce most efficiently and trade for the goods they need. This allows each country to benefit from the efficiencies of specialization, leading to greater wealth for all participants. Smith's insights into the benefits of free trade laid the groundwork for modern trade theory. Today, international trade agreements and organizations like the World Trade Organization, WTO, are based on the principles of free trade that Smith championed. Quote from the text, "No society can surely be flourishing and happy of which the far greater part of the members are poor and miserable." Smith recognized that trade barriers not only hurt consumers by raising prices, but they also harm workers by limiting economic opportunities. In a world of free trade, nations can prosper by focusing on their strengths and trading with others for the goods they cannot produce as efficiently. While Adam Smith was a strong proponent of free markets, he was also deeply concerned about the dangers of monopolies and the abuse of market power. He recognized that when a single company or group of companies dominates a market, it can lead to higher prices, lower quality, and reduced innovation. A monopoly occurs when one company has exclusive control over the production and sale of a particular product or service. Without competition, the monopolist has little incentive to lower prices or improve the quality of its products. Consumers are left with fewer choices and higher costs, and the overall efficiency of the market is reduced. Smith argued that monopolies could arise naturally in certain industries, particularly those with high barriers to entry, such as railroads or utilities. However, he also warned that monopolies could be created or sustained by government intervention. For example, if the government grants a company exclusive rights to produce a certain good or service, it creates an artificial monopoly that can harm consumers. Smith was also concerned about collusion between companies, where firms in the same industry conspire to fix prices, limit production, or divide markets among themselves. This practice, known as cartelization, undermines the benefits of competition and allows companies to extract higher profits at the expense of consumers. In The Wealth of Nations, Smith famously remarked that businessmen rarely get together without conspiring to raise prices. He believed that governments should be vigilant in preventing such collusion and ensuring that markets remain competitive. While Smith generally favored minimal government intervention, he recognized that there were times when the government needed to step in to regulate monopolies and prevent the abuse of market power. He argued that governments should break up monopolies where possible and ensure that natural monopolies, such as utilities, are regulated in a way that protects consumers. Smith's insights into monopolies and market power laid the foundation for modern antitrust laws, which are designed to prevent monopolies and promote competition. Today, these laws are a critical part of economic policy in many countries, helping to ensure that markets remain competitive and that consumers are protected from the abuses of monopolistic practices. Smith's warning about the dangers of collusion and monopolies remains relevant today. In industries ranging from technology to pharmaceuticals, governments must remain vigilant to ensure that companies do not abuse their market power and that consumers have access to fair prices and quality products. One of the most well-known and influential concepts in The Wealth of Nations is Smith's theory of the division of labor. This idea, which we touched upon earlier, forms the cornerstone of modern economic thought, and Smith's exploration of it is as relevant today as it was during the Industrial Revolution. The division of labor refers to the process by which tasks in a production system are broken down into smaller, more specialized tasks, each performed by different workers. Smith's analysis of the division of labor begins with a simple but powerful observation. When workers specialize in a specific task, they become much more efficient at performing it. This efficiency arises from three key factors. 1. Increased dexterity. By focusing on a single task, workers develop greater skill and speed in performing that task. Repetition leads to mastery, which in turn leads to faster production. 2. Time saved. When workers specialize, they no longer need to switch from one task to another, saving time and energy that would otherwise be spent on adjusting to new tasks. 3. Innovation. Specialization encourages innovation because workers become intimately familiar with their specific tasks and are more likely to identify ways to improve the process or invent new tools to make their work easier. Smith illustrates these principles through his famous example of a pin factory. In a factory where the production of pins is divided into specialized tasks, such as drawing out the wire, cutting it, and sharpening it, workers can produce far more pins than if each worker attempted to make an entire pin from start to finish. According to Smith's calculations, a factory employing 10 workers could produce 48,000 pins per day through the division of labor, whereas an individual worker might only be able to produce a handful of pins on their own. Smith's insight into the division of labor goes beyond the factory floor. He argued that the principle applies to all forms of economic activity, from agriculture to services. In a well-functioning economy, different regions, industries, and even entire countries can specialize in the tasks they perform best, leading to greater overall efficiency and productivity. For example, one region might specialize in producing agricultural goods, while another focuses on manufacturing or technology. Through trade, these regions can exchange goods and services, allowing each to benefit from the specialization of the other. Smith extended his analysis of the division of labor to international trade. He argued that just as individuals can benefit from specializing in specific tasks, countries can benefit from specializing in the production of goods in which they have a comparative advantage. By trading with other countries, each nation can enjoy a greater variety of goods at lower prices than if it tried to produce everything domestically. This insight laid the groundwork for the theory of comparative advantage, which remains a cornerstone of modern trade theory. Today, the division of labor is a fundamental concept not only in economics, but also in management and organizational theory. This quote encapsulates Smith's belief that the division of labor is a powerful force for increasing productivity and wealth. By allowing individuals, businesses, and nations to specialize, the economy as a whole becomes more efficient and prosperous. One of the key factors that determine the extent to which the division of labor can be applied is the size of the market. Smith argued that a larger market allows for greater specialization because it provides a greater demand for specialized goods and services. In small markets, there may not be enough demand to justify dividing labor into highly specialized tasks. But in larger markets, businesses can afford to employ workers who specialize in very specific tasks because there's enough demand to make it profitable. Smith used the example of a rural village versus a large city to illustrate this point. In a small village, a single blacksmith might be responsible for making a variety of tools, repairing equipment, and performing other tasks. However, in a large city with a much larger market, the blacksmith can afford to specialize in just one type of tool, allowing for greater efficiency and productivity. Smith also pointed out that international trade expands the size of the market, allowing for even greater specialization. By trading with other nations, countries can access a larger pool of consumers, which in turn allows their industries to specialize more fully. This is another reason why Smith was such a strong advocate of free trade. By opening up markets to foreign competition and consumers, nations can increase their productivity and wealth. This quote highlights the relationship between the size of the market and the division of labor. Smith recognized that without a sufficiently large market, the benefits of specialization would be limited. This insight is particularly relevant in today's globalized economy, where international trade has expanded the size of markets to unprecedented levels. One of the essential elements in Smith's analysis of the division of labor and trade is the role of money as a medium of exchange. In a barter system, where goods are exchanged directly for other goods, the division of labor would be severely limited because it would be difficult for people to find others who want exactly what they have to offer. Money solves this problem by providing a common medium of exchange that everyone accepts. Instead of trading goods for goods, people can trade goods for money and then use that money to buy the goods and services they need. This greatly facilitates trade and allows for a much more extensive division of labor. Smith traces the origins of money to the desire of individuals to facilitate exchange. In early societies, people might have used items like cattle, salt, or precious metals as money because these items were widely desired and easy to exchange. Over time, however, societies began to develop more sophisticated forms of money, such as coins and paper currency, which were easier to transport and store. Smith's analysis of money also touches on the importance of trust in the economy. For money to function effectively, people must trust that the currency they receive will hold its value and be accepted by others in future transactions. This trust is often backed by the government, which issues and regulates the currency. Inflation and the dangers of debasing the currency. Smith also warned about the dangers of inflation and the debasement of currency. When governments print too much money or reduce the value of the currency by mixing it with less valuable metals, it leads to inflation, which reduces the purchasing power of money. Inflation erodes the value of savings, makes it more difficult for people to plan for the future, and disrupts the smooth functioning of the economy. Smith's insights into the importance of sound money have had a lasting impact on economic policy. Today, central banks carefully manage the money supply to prevent inflation and maintain the stability of the currency. Quote from the text, "Money is not the wheels of commerce, but the oil which renders the wheels more smooth and easy." Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. This quote illustrates Smith's view that money is not the source of wealth itself, but rather a tool that facilitates trade and economic activity. The real wealth of a nation lies in its ability to produce goods and services, and money is simply the means by which those goods and services are exchanged. Conclusion: the legacy of Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations. Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations is more than just a book about economics. It is a profound exploration of how societies function, how wealth is created, and how human nature interacts with economic systems. Smith's insights into the division of labor, the role of free markets, and the importance of competition have shaped the field of economics and continue to influence policymakers, businesses, and individuals today. Smith's belief in the power of self-interest to promote the public good through the invisible hand of the market remains one of the most powerful ideas in economics. His arguments for free trade, competition, and limited government intervention laid the foundation for the economic systems of modern democracies. But perhaps most importantly, Smith recognized that economic growth and prosperity are not just about accumulating wealth, they are about improving the lives of ordinary people. His vision of a society where individuals are free to pursue their own goals, where markets allocate resources efficiently, and where competition drives innovation and progress remains a powerful ideal. Quote from the text, "Little else is requisite to carry a state to the highest degree of opulence, from the lowest barbarism, but peace, easy taxes, and a tolerable administration of justice, all the rest being brought about by the natural course of things." Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. In this quote, Smith captures his optimistic view of economic progress. He believed that with the right conditions, peace, fair taxes, and justice, society could achieve unprecedented levels of wealth and prosperity through the natural workings of the market. As you reflect on Adam Smith's timeless insights, think about how these principles apply to the world we live in today. From the complexities of international trade to the role of government in regulating markets, the ideas Smith presented in The Wealth of Nations are as relevant now as they were in the 18th century. If you're eager to dive deeper into economic thought and understand how these theories shape modern economies, don't forget to follow FactUp for more engaging content. We're committed to exploring the ideas that have shaped history and continue to influence our future. Stay tuned for more thought-provoking discussions, and be sure to subscribe to support the channel.